It was the season when the last rains ended and the heat began. The red earth streets of Benin City steamed under the morning sun. The palace gates stood open, and their carved panels shone with oil. Chiefs wearing coral and white cloth moved slowly through the courtyards, their brass anklets ringing with each step. In the largest courtyard, big enough for 1,000 warriors, the coronation drums echoed. Ovonramwen Nogbaisi stepped forward. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and looked calm but commanding. Around his neck were heavy layers of coral beads. His arms and wrists had ivory bracelets, each carved with symbols of past victories. The Iwebo chiefs presented the sacred crown, a coral cap with strands that fell over the face, the veil of kingship. The Uzama kingmakers recited the oaths. The Oba must protect the kingdom as a leopard protects its cubs, uphold the ancient customs, and answer to the ancestors if he fails. When they placed the crown on his head, the crowd shouted royal praise names. The drums rolled like distant thunder. At that moment, Ovonramwen became more than a man. He became the living symbol of Benin itself. At peak, Benin was an impressive city. It had massive earthworks with deep moats and high walls around the capital and nearby villages. The streets were straight and wide, kept clean by a team of workers. At night, the sound of a gong from the palace echoed across the city, calling chiefs to meetings. The palace was a collection of courtyards, audience halls, shrines, and storerooms, rather than a single building. Palm thatch roofs shaded the path, and carved wooden pillars displayed stories of past kings. Every part of the city was connected to the king's throne. The Iwebo guilds took care of the royal symbols and weapons. The Iwegwe managed palace ceremonies, and the Ibiwe looked after the royal wives and children. In the markets, every trader paid tribute to the king's representatives. Craftsmen such as ivory carvers, leather workers, and bronze casters created their goods not just for profit, but to honor the kingdom. For centuries, the kingdom had traded with people from across the sea. They arrived in large ships bringing cloth, mirrors, and jade in exchange for ivory, pepper, and palm oil. However, during Ovonramwen's time, their numbers increased and their demands became more intense. Messengers from the coast delivered worrying news. The outsiders now wanted free access to Benin's markets without paying tribute or following palace rules. They were unhappy with the kingdom's customs, such as tribute fees, ceremonial delays, and sacred festivals that interrupted trade. The Oba listened to these complaints, but he felt uneasy. Trade was a royal right, protected for many years. Losing control over trade would weaken the throne's power. One evening, as the sun set and the palace shadows grew long, the royal bell rang to call the chiefs. They met in the Oba's audience hall, a large room with carved pillars and oil lamps that filled the space with warm light. The Iyase spoke first, his voice serious.
Omo Noba! Word from the coast is troubling. The white strangers grow bold. They demand to pass our gates without tribute.
The Ezomo, a seasoned war chief, struck the floor with his staff.
They test our strength. If we allow this, tomorrow they will demand more. Our markets, our land, our freedom.
The Ologbosere, commander of the army, leaned forward.
Their soldiers are not many yet, but they carry weapons unlike ours. However, the forest is ours. If they march uninvited, we can bleed them before they reach the city.
Ovonramwen listened in silence, the coral strands of his veil swaying.
We are the children of those who built these walls. Benin has never bowed to outsiders. Let them trade on our terms or not at all.
During the dry season, The harmattan winds blew dust across the courtyards, marking the start of the Igwe festival, the most important time of the year. For days and nights, the Oba stayed secluded, performing rituals to strengthen the land's spiritual power and honor the ancestors. During Igwe, the Oba could not handle normal duties or meet with foreign delegations. Doing so would disrespect the spirits and endanger the kingdom's blessings for the coming year. Despite this, a British led mission announced it would come to Benin City. Ovonramwen's chiefs sent a message that the timing was not right and requested the mission to wait. Their warning was ignored. A British group moved from the coast. It was made up of officials, armed guards, carriers, and traders. They said it was a peaceful mission, but the rifles on their shoulders suggested otherwise. The news reached the warriors of Benin, and the chiefs held an urgent meeting. The Ezomo spoke clearly.
They enter during our sacred season. They come armed. This is not diplomacy, it is a challenge.
The Ologbosere rose.
Then we answer as warriors.
Warriors moved swiftly through the forest, their bodies painted with chalk, their amulets tied tight. In the thick bush, where the path narrowed and visibility was poor, the warriors struck. Muskets fired, arrows flew, and spears shined in the scattered light. When the fighting ended, only a few of the intruders escaped. The chiefs knew what would follow. The British would not let this pass. They would return with an army. Weeks later, the forest paths trembled as over 1,000 men marched. Soldiers in red coats, African helpers in khaki, and carriers loaded with ammunition and supplies were on the move. Machine guns were set up on tripods, and rockets were stored in wooden crates. The Benin chiefs summoned their warriors from across the kingdom. The Egavo Nore led the defense. Each group had its own weapons. Some carried flintlock muskets, while others had swords, spears, and shields made from elephant hide. They carried charms against bullets, chanted war songs, and swore oaths before the shrines of their ancestors. At dawn, mist covered the trees like a blanket. Scouts tracked the enemy for days, counting their soldiers and weapons. The leaders chose a narrow part of the forest, surrounded by swamps, as the site for battle. The plan was simple. Hidden gunmen would shoot from both sides, spearmen would attack from behind, and drummers in the bushes would create false signals to confuse the enemy. When the British marched in, the first musket fired, then another one. Smoke filled the trees, warriors charged, spears flying. Loud war cries echoed through the air. The British had trouble setting up their machine guns in the tight space, but rifle shots broke through the shields and ranks of the spearmen. The warriors pushed forward several times, making the enemy retreat until they managed to hold their line. After hours of fighting, with rockets destroying trees and fire spreading in the underbrush, the warriors withdrew in good order. They had delayed the enemy's advance, but now the city's walls faced the coming storm. By the time the British reached the walls, the defenders were exhausted but still fighting back. They had closed the gates and guarded the moats. Warriors stood on the walls, throwing spears and shooting muskets. The British started attacking with cannons. The gates shook with each hit, and cracks appeared in the wood. Smoke filled the streets. The warriors fought back hard, shooting from the walls and then hiding for protection. Eventually, the gates broke down, and the British rushed in. The narrow streets turned into battlefields. Warriors fought with swords and spears from doorways and alleys. Muskets fired at close range, leaving burn marks on the fallen. The British moved forward, their firepower taking down defenders quicker than they could replace them. One courtyard after another fell. They breached the palace. Sacred shrines were destroyed, and ancestral altars were knocked over. Thousands of bronzes and ivories, symbols of the kingdom, were stolen. Flames erupted, and black smoke rose into the sky. The sound of fire drowned out the last cries of resistance. Ovonramwen left before the final attack. He escaped with a few loyal followers. They traveled through forests and swamps at night and hid during the day. He still wore his coral beads, but they had lost their shine after weeks of wear. For months, patrols searched for him, asking villagers questions and offering rewards for information. Finally, he was betrayed by some chiefs who wanted to protect themselves by revealing his hiding place. They took him to the coast with strong guards. Witnesses said that even though he was defeated, he stood tall and did not bow to his captors. He asked for his coral regalia when he surrendered, but the British refused. They feared the sight of him in full royal dress would stir his people's hearts. From the coast, he was taken far away, across the creeks to a place he had never seen. He spent his final days in exile, far from the red earth of Benin, but in the hearts of his people. He remained their Oba. The kingdom lost its political independence, but its culture remained strong. The stolen bronzes are now in glass cases in distant lands, but every carving and plaque still tells of Benin's greatness. Ovonramwen Nogbaisi became more than just a man. He became a symbol of resistance, reminding people of a time when Benin stood against an empire. The red walls may have fallen, but the memory of that proud city still lives on in the hearts of its descendants.